Hello, everyone. Welcome to Round the Horn. The music you hear in the background is by today's special guest, singer-songwriter and avid Yankee fan, Bruce Tunkel. Bruce has produced 14 albums starting back in 1986 with his band, The Red House, as well as Susan Rumors and his solo work. Hello, Bruce. How are you?
Hey Lee, I'm great. How are you?
Well, we're doing okay, I guess, as well as can be expected under the circumstances.
Yes.
And that gives us a chance to chat a little bit about things, music in general, and of course, we're baseball fans, of course, too. And luckily, we've got opening day tomorrow here,
Yeah.
all over the place. It's great to have it back. So let's tell people a little bit about your background first.
Okay. So, I've been playing music around the great state of New Jersey for quite a while. First with the band The Red House and solo for the last, almost 30 years, I guess. So I started when I was three, obviously. Um, and music is certainly one of my great loves of my life, and just keep doing it. Love to do it. Still feeling super creative, and just released a new record and working on new stuff still beyond that. So I
You
can't
are
get enough.
probably one of the most prolific writers that I have ever known. And of course, one of the best as well, too, throughout the state of New Jersey.
Thank you so much.
Now, we play it often on Radio Jersey, our daily radio
Yeah,
program on asburymusic.com. And of course, we get a lot of requests for the Red House, especially.
cool. Yeah, I appreciate that very much. Yeah, the prolific thing is interesting. So I'm probably more so now than I ever was, and it's kind of I guess a paradox from how maybe it is for some people. But I got into this Artist's Way thing, which is it's a book if anybody wants to check it out, and it's to summarize it down to nothing. It's essentially a program of stuff to do to unlock creativity, and I found it very useful. It got me to really be able to not stop myself from writing. That's a thing I think a lot of people may battle with, where you're your own worst enemy with this stuff. And once you can learn to shut yourself up and just write instead of thinking too much about writing, you can actually get more done, and more honest writing, and better. And anyway, it's a good thing to just scope out for anybody creative, not just songwriters.
Most of the stuff that you're writing about, of course, it's got to be about personal, instances and experiences. But it's amazing to me, especially not only from this current album, but your previous work, is how much good stuff you come up with.
Oh, thank
you
you.
know that's amazing, because I've got a daughter who's a budding songwriter
Yeah,
and singer, and
she's pretty good, by the way.
that,
I saw
she's
her.
doing well,
I got to see her at the Light of Day show.
right? But it's amazing, and I know, as a amateur songwriter, I had one that was published, and it's amazing sometimes that you come up with ideas, but then it's tough to finish them up, and
Hmm.
especially coming up not only with lyrics but with great music as well, too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting combo. So I used to write music first and then lyrics, and what I found happened was that I would have, and I still do. You accumulate hundreds and hundreds of pieces of music with no lyrics, and I had found the lyric writing to be more challenging. And like you said, you end up with all these unfinished pieces. So I would have a lot of bits of music, and then you're trying to write lyrics to fit a pre-done melody or song. And sometime at some point I kind of flipped it up, and I started writing lyrics first. And part of this Artist's Way, that's something that helped me be able to write lyrics a little more easily. And that actually has worked better, because then what happens is when you write a lyric, and then you write music to it, now you've actually got a complete song. So you're not sitting there with something, well, at some point I'll come back to this and finish it. And inevitably what happens is there's tweaking, of course, to happen, once you start trying to marry the words and the music. But I find it a faster path to get a complete song done. So that's been a good approach for me. I'm going to try to stay with that.
Yeah, well, it's worked, that's for sure. It's some great stuff that you've been coming up with. So let's get into baseball. That's why we're here.
Right.
Did you play as a kid?
I sure did. I wasn't any great player, but played in Little League, played a little bit in school. And contrary to my size, I was actually a catcher, and I was there for the main reason that I was a terrible fielder. So so if I would go in the outfield or the infield, I really couldn't make the plays, but I had a pretty good throwing arm. So I ended up being a catcher, even though I weighed, probably when I played, I weighed 90 pounds soaking wet, but I did okay with it. And I could throw somebody out at second base. Now and then I'd end up in right field, and I could always hit okay. I'm not a big guy. I was not a power hitter, but I can make contact. So love to play, though. Great game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, today's catchers don't have to be as big as they used to be. I mean, normally you would see the biggest kid on the team was the catcher, but today, because you can't bowl catcher over at home plate, you don't have to be as big. And there's a lot of guys, and most recently, guys like Mike Lieberthal, who was probably all of 5'8", 5'9", but just had a cannon for an arm.
Right.
In fact,
Yeah.
I had a guy in the minors who was about that I think he was 5'10", and unbelievable arm. And that was probably the best. He's a tough catcher too, as well. You could back then you could bowl guys over at home plate,
Yeah.
and he always stood his ground, and that's for sure. And today he's actually a catching instructor for the Los Angeles Dodgers. So
Oh, awesome.
it's amazing. You don't have to be a big guy anymore. And things that we look for as scouts when we're looking at a game is basically the arm. That's for sure.
Right.
You got a
Yeah.
good arm, and even if you can't make it behind the plate, if you're a good arm, you can maybe throw somebody out from third base or something like that.
Yep.
So I see that you've got a Yankee hat on. So you are actually a Yankee fan from way back, I believe.
From way back. Yeah. So, I got teased a lot, not teased, but, when the Yankees were doing their magic in the late 90s, there were a lot of fair weather Yankee fans. But I said, boy, I was never that. I was there, I think I really got into the Yankees around 1972. And right before that, I do remember, when the Mets won in '69, and I remember getting caught up in that a little bit. But I was pretty young. It's hard to really remember. But soon after that, I think, it probably isn't true what I'm going to say, but I feel like I tuned into the Yankee game that Bobby Mercer hit 3 homers in the game,
Oh, wow.
and
Okay.
he was my first hero, and that's when I followed the team. So there were a lot of lean years in there too, especially in the early '70s, and then of course in the '80s. I think
Yeah, right.
there were some rough times there to be. And I used to, I mean, I listened to a lot of the games and watched them whenever I could.
Yeah, some of those years were lean. Let me put it that way.
Oh yeah, they were
There's
really rough,
still
but
some great players on those teams.
absolutely. Well, I mean, the thing that still breaks my heart today, I can almost start crying thinking about it. So Mattingly was, another hero, and the fact that he was there just at the wrong time, and
Right, right.
that he in '95 when he played his last game, and he had such a great series against Seattle, and that moment of Griffey scoring the winning run in Game 5 and Mattingly walking off the field. I used to have a picture that I look at now and then, and yeah, it's crushing. It's
Sure,
devastating. But
sure, yeah.
he was the best. His whole everything about him, the way he played, and his ethic and everything.
Yeah,
Just
there
great.
were great players on those teams. Ron Guidry in particular.
Oh, yeah, Guidry was great. I mean, I think my favorite times, the winning is great, and honestly, um, the as Yankee fans, we're spoiled, right? I mean, if the Yankees don't win again for 20 years, I mean, we had things that other teams, never see, this run. But I think my favorite years were the years right before the great things happen. So I loved the Yankee teams in like 93 to 95. And I think what was so great about that was, they had gone from being just the stinkers of the league, in the late 80s and beginning of the 90s. And then they started making these moves, and you saw them getting better, and they were really hungry. And, so when Bernie Williams came up, and they got Paul O'Neill, who I loved Paul O'Neill,
Sure.
um, and Jimmy Key, who I thought Key was a acquisition. He was huge to turning them around, because they brought these guys in that they had won with other teams. And I think they really brought this winning mentality to them.
Right. Sure.
And I loved 94, 95. Even though they fell short in 95, you could just see it. They wanted it so badly, and I just great, loved it.
And let's talk about, I think Stick Michael was the GM at the time. So he was the one that was the designer of those teams.
Yeah.
But, with Yankee history, you can see, of course, like when you go back to see Don Mattingly, and I mean, not many people knew about, his injuries, especially with his back. But
Right.
he was a battler, that's for sure. And I think Rizzo on the Cubs is having the same problems with his back. So hopefully he'll be able to go through it. With today's modern medicine, though, Mattingly probably could have played a lot longer if he received the right kind of treatment.
Yeah, and I read an interview with him. I don't remember what year it was, but maybe a few years after he retired. And he was talking about, I guess he was at the stadium for something. Anyway, he said he went and took batting practice, and he said something like, I could play, like, like I felt good. I could step right in there and play again, And it's a little bit heartbreaking, because I forget how old he was when he was done, but he wasn't too old, right?
No,
He was like
no, right.
34, 35, maybe,
Yeah,
something
right.
like that.
Exactly. It was just his back. He couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, just a great player.
Yeah. I always loved watching him play. He had the sweetest left-handed swing that you could ever imagine.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just no motion whatsoever. All of a sudden, it's bang, an explosion when you hit the ball.
Yeah.
You could tell.
A good buddy of mine was at the game, and I guess game 2 in 95, when Mattingly homered in that game against Seattle.
Right.
And he said he thought the stadium was going to fall apart. He said,
It
they
probably
were
was.
stomping. Yeah, right. That's right. They did tear it down soon after. But yeah, that was a great series. I'm still mad about a little bit with Buck Showalter. One of the peeves of mine in both directions, both good managing and bad. But I thought in that series, if you remember the whole fiasco of Wetland had blown game 4.
Right, sure.
We get to game 5, and he didn't bring Wetland in, right? And he brought Jack McDowell in to pitch.
Right.
And, I never liked that. I thought it was this whole, a big mistake of overthinking the managing. It's like, look, you went the whole season with this guy. You gotta keep going. You don't change your strategy then. And a flip thing with managing, or a different team, when the Yankees played the Mets in the 2000 series, I have a lot of friends who are Mets fans, and I thought it was a great illustration of Torre's management style versus Bobby Valentine. And so there was a spot in, I want to say game 2, where it was early in the game, and the Yankees had a runner on third. And anyway, there was a spot where Valentine didn't bring the infield in. It was a spot where you might bring the infield in. It was a no-score game at that point. And I remember calling my friend and I said, "Hey, how come Valentine's not bringing the infield in?" And we're arguing about it. But after the game, which the Yankees won, they asked Valentine that question, "Why don't you bring the infield in?" And he said something like, "Well, I didn't want to show any panic. I didn't want to show the team, panic." And I'm thinking, this is the World Series, buddy.
That's right.
This is the time to panic now. It's not July 4th here.
Right.
So and conversely, Torre, he would go to that bringing Rivera in the 8th inning because he knew like we have to win. There's no tomorrow, right? So anyway,
Right.
I think managers do get themselves into the game too much sometimes and not enough other times.
Right, overthinking. You mentioned Jack McDowell, and I don't know if you're familiar with Jack, but he had a band actually.
Yes.
And a couple of albums out. And Mike Massaros, the bass player for the Smithereens, we had him on as a guest earlier in the season. And he was actually the bass player for Jack McDowell's band for a while.
Is that right?
Jack's band would open up for the Smithereens.
Ah, awesome.
So yeah, I have actually, I think in my collection, I have a copy of the album. It's called The View, and he's on the cover. Great picture, that's for sure. And it's right, when you bring in guys that have that winning attitude, it changes everybody. He was a scrapper, I know that for sure.
Yeah.
When you bring up Ron Guidry, our I don't know if you know Jack Scarangella, but Jack is a drummer, played with La Bamba and the Red Bank Rockers, and he was actually Ron Guidry's drum teacher.
Oh, I didn't know that Ron Guidry played.
He did, and actually what happened was, well, Ron heard that Jack was a drummer and he wanted to take lessons. So Jack and Ron set up 2 drum kits in a storage room underneath Yankee Stadium. And Ron would play drums before going out to the bullpen to warm up before a game. So the 2 of them, they set up a sound system and they would play drums together. And later on, the drum kit passed on from Yankee to Yankee, and Paul O'Neill was one of them. And supposedly a real good drummer himself.
Yeah. I vaguely remember something about Paul O'Neill, but I didn't know that about Guidry. That's great.
Yeah, and Willie Randolph, I think, played on the drum kit. Greg Nettles, I think, as well, too. I'd have to check with Jack about that, but
wow.
Jack's an amazing character. He's got tons and tons of stories.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
Well, growing up as a Yankee fan myself, and then, of course, when the Mets came around, my grandfather was a great, great Mets fan. So I got to love both. I mean, you always said, well, the Yankees are my American League team and the Mets are my National League team. And we still do that today. But those days of listening to Mel Allen and Red Barber and there's some of those great Yankee announcers. Those were days back. You can't replace those guys. That's for sure.
No. Rizzuto was the guy. When I got into it, he was there, and Rizzuto and Bill White and Frank Messer, right? That was the team.
Messer was great. I mean, he was the glue that held that all together.
Well, Rizzuto got so funny, right? Because he was like, he would not even be paying attention to the game at some point, and you could tell like he's talking about, recipes for, pasta or whatever, and they're like, hey, Phil, we just had a triple play here. Oh, okay.
Right. I remember one day they were doing an intro, and this is one of the bloopers, and I think, Rizzuto, being the character he was, he comes on and he says, "Hi, everybody, I'm Bill White." Did you know that Yogi and Phil Rizzuto owned a bowling alley up in North Jersey somewhere?
Did not know that. I know they both lived in Jersey. I know where Phil lived in Hillside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it was in that area.
There, right?
Yeah, probably. I think the was on Route 22 somewhere. It was Barra Rizzuto Bowling Alley or Bowling Lane, or something like that.
When was that open?
When they were playing.
Oh, Wow.
That was there were the two investors, and they bought a bowling alley, I guess, because they thought it was going to make a lot of money. The shopping center that it was in is still there. In fact, it was for sale recently.
Huh.
It's something I'm eventually going to take a visit and see if there's any remnants of it all. But yeah, there's pictures of it in some on Google. When you go in and check out the bowling alley that they were owners of. I don't know if they did anything actively as far as running the business or anything like that.
Yeah.
But Yankee tradition is amazing, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah, there's no shortage of stories and good players and good memories. I mean, yeah, it just so many magic moments. And like I said, even if there's no more coming for me, I had my fill. You have the
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to have to edit that out, so that's all right.
The magic of editing.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought, you know why? I've got it connected in through my computer. That's why. Well, anyway, let's continue again. I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1. We'll wrap things up.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Well, that's all we have time for today, Bruce. Unfortunately, we could go on and on and on talking about Yankee history and tradition, but we appreciate you stopping by and spending some time with us. It was great to catch up as well.
Yep. Thank you for having me, Lee. It's great to chat with you, and stay well, my friend.
Yes, you too, and continued success with your music.
Thank you.
Our thanks to Bruce Tunkel for joining us today. If you'd like to hear more about Bruce and his music, go to www.brucetunkel.com. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you all next week. Good night.